Welcome back to At Mama Feely's Feet, the podcast. I'm your host, Hope Venetta. Today, I want to introduce you to someone very dear to me, my great, 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 great grandmother, Mama Feely. But she's more than just my ancestor. She's become a voice, a presence, and a guide, not only for me, but for everyone who longs for a connection to the past that feels out of reach. For many African Americans, there are no clear records of our lineage. No names, no faces, no details connecting us to the past. It can leave us feeling unmoored, like we are floating, relying on the here and now or our own creativity to imagine a rootedness we know is there, but can't touch. That was my story too. For years, I ached for connection, knowing something ancient was beneath my feet, but having nothing tangible to hold on to. And then in 2016, that all changed. That year, several people on my mother's side of the family began researching our history. They pored over records, pieced together fragments, and brought what they discovered to our family reunion. And let me tell you, it was the classic African American family reunion. We were at a park, there was a cookout, there were kids running around, music in the air, and all of us were wearing matching t-shirts. In the middle of all that joy and laughter, they unveiled the family history book. And as I flipped through its pages, my eyes landed on something that brought me to tears. A name. For the first time, I had a name that tied me directly to an ancestor who had lived through enslavement. My great, 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 great grandmother, an enslaved woman who lived on a Wake County plantation. Her name was Feely. I cried when I saw it. I finally had something tangible, something to anchor me. No longer faceless, no longer nameless. Here was my granny, reaching out through history to say, "You're not alone. I'm with you. You belong to a people. You came from a lineage." And that was the day I met Mama Feely. As I began writing, I realized that while I was naming a real person, I was also carrying the voices of many women like her. Women who were enslaved, whose very existence hinged on the whims of someone else. Women who survived, who nurtured, who taught their children how to have faith and endure in a world bent on breaking them. Mama Feely is one woman, but she's also many. She's a patchwork, a collage of four mothers whose names are lost to history. She's the granny we sit beside, listening to stories, her hands braiding our hair, a pot simmering on the stove, the smell of shea butter and ivory soap lingering in the air. I know that for many of us, tracing our lineage isn't possible. The records are missing, or simply were never kept. That loss leaves us feeling like we're floating without roots, and that in itself is a wound all its own. That is why I share Mama Feely with you. In the African American tradition of fictive kinship, where friends become play cousins and elders become aunties and uncles, I offer her as our grandmother. If your history feels like silence, then I invite you to borrow mine. Let Mama Feely sit with you too. Here's the challenge that I face though. How do you put a voice to someone like Mama Feely? I wrestled with this question over and over again. So should I use slave vernacular of the 19th century? That would offer a historically accurate and immersive experience. Or should I lean into a more flowery style, the kind of format, and delivery that was common during that period? Or should I bring her voice in today's vernacular, making sure her wisdom is easy to grasp for modern readers? Writers like Zora Neale Hurston and Toni Morrison have shown us how to masterfully use broken, quote unquote, English and African American vernacular that can capture truth, rhythm, and beauty. And yet, I also know how difficult those forms can be for some readers who come to them without context. And so I had to ask myself, do I risk alienating some readers for the sake of accuracy, or do I risk smoothing away the very texture of her voice in order to make her more accessible? So by no means do I compare myself to those literary giants that I named, but their work forced me to hold that tension, because the last thing I wanted was to turn Mama Feely into a caricature, flattening her into something less than human. In the end, my goal was simple: to honor her, to let her voice come through in a way that resonates, that feels true to her time while still being comprehensible to ours. And this isn't just about language. It's about legacy. It's about ensuring that what you hear Mama Feely speak, that when you hear her speak, you feel both the weight of history and the nearness of her wisdom. I don't know if I've gotten it perfect, but I hope in the way I've written her that I've done her justice. Writing about Mama Feely was both a gift and a responsibility. I just talked about how I wrestled with how to represent her, how to do her justice when so much of her daily life went unrecorded. But to fill the gaps about her daily life, I turned to slave narratives, those firsthand testimonies of men and women who lived through slavery. Their words helped me bring cold history into warm, human focus. They gave me language to imagine what Mama Feely might have said, how she might have prayed, and how she might have guided her children. In doing so, I wasn't just writing history. I was trying to identify the roots of our collective trauma, to show that the pain that we feel today has a past, but so does our resilience. So who is Mama Feely? She's my 4 times great-grandmother, but she's also the grandmother for all of us who need one. She's both a real ancestor and a symbol of the countless enslaved women who passed down survival, faith, and wisdom. My hope is that as you listen to her stories in this series, you'll feel a little more rooted, a little less alone, because you're not rootless. You walk with thousands behind you. So tomorrow, we'll begin talking about how trauma doesn't just stay in the past. It gets carried forward through generations, and why that matters for our healing today. And before we close, I must remind you that this podcast was meant for educational and inspirational purposes only. It's not a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a licensed mental health professional. Okay, until tomorrow, remember that your story matters, your healing matters, and that you are not alone.